There is a large diversity in the biological world, and each organism has evolved its own mechanism to multiply and produce offspring. The organism habitat, its internal physiology, and several other factors are collectively responsible for how it reproduces. Based on whether there is participation of one organism or two in the process of reproduction. It is of two types: when offspring is produced by a single parent with or without the involvement of gamete formation. The reproduction is asexual, when two parents opposite sex and also involve fusion of male and female gametes. It is called sexual reproduction. Now, asexual reproduction. In this method, a single individual parent is capable of producing offspring. As a result, the offspring that are produced are not only identical to one another but are also exact copies of their parent. The term clone is used to describe such morphologically and genetically similar individuals. In these organisms, cell division itself a mode of reproduction. Many single-celled organisms reproduce by binary fission, where a cell divides into two halves and each rapidly grows into an adult, for example, amoeba and paramecium. In yeast, the division is unequal and small birds are produced that remain attached initially to the parent cell, which eventually gets separated and mature into new yeast cells. Members of the kingdom fungi and simple plants such as algae reproduce through special asexual reproductive structures. The most common of these structures are zoospores that usually are microscopic motile structure. Other common asexual reproductive structure are conidia, for an example penicillium, birds in hydra, and gameoles as in sponges. While in animals and other simple organisms, the term asexual is used for unambiguously in plants. The term vegetative reproduction is frequently used in plants. The units of vegetative propagation, such as runner, rhizome, sucker, tuber, offset, bulb, are all capable of giving rise to new offspring. These structures are called vegetative propagules. Obviously, since the formation of these structures does not involve two parents, the process involved is asexual. You must have heard about the scourge of the water bodies or about the terror of Bengal. This is nothing but the aquatic plant water hyacinth, which is one of the most invasive weeds found growing wherever there is a standing water. It drains oxygen from the water, which leads to the death of fishes. These plants was introduced in India because of its beautiful flowers and shapes of leaves. Since it can propagate vegetatively at a phenomenal rate and spread all over the water body in a short period of time, it is very difficult to get rid of them. Are you aware how plants like potato, sugarcane, banana, ginger, dahlia are cultivated? Have you seen small plants emerging from the buds called eyes of the potato tuber from the rhizomes of banana and ginger? When you carefully try to determine the site of origin of the new plantlets in the plants listed above, you will notice that they invariably arise from the nodes present in the modified stems of these plants. When the nodes come in contact with the damp soil or water, they produce roots and new plants. Similarly, adventitious buds arise from the notches present at margins of leaves of bryophyllum. This ability is fully exploited by the gardeners and farmers for commercial propagation of such plants. It is interesting to note that asexual reproduction is the common method of reproduction in organisms that have a relatively simple organization like algae and fungi, and that this shift to sexual method of reproduction just before the onset of adverse conditions. Now, sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves formation of the male and female gametes either by the same individual or by different individuals of the opposite sex. These gametes fuse to form a zygote which develops to the form of new organism. It is an elaborate, complex and slow process as compared to asexual reproduction. Because of the fusion of male and female gametes, sexual reproduction results in offspring that are not identical the parents or amongst themselves. A study of diverse organisms, plants, animals, or fungi show that they differ so greatly in external morphology, internal structure, and physiology. When it comes to sexual mode of reproduction, these share a similar pattern. Let us first discuss what features are common to these diverse organisms. All organisms have to reach a certain stage of growth and maturity in their life before they can reproduce sexually. That period of growth is called the juvenile phase. It is known as vegetative phase. In plants, this phase is of variable durations in different organisms. The end of juvenile vegetative phase, which marks the beginning of the reproductive phase, can be seen easily in the higher plants when they come to flower. Observe a few trees in your area who they flower during the same month year after year. Why do you think the availability of fruits like mango, apple, jackfruit, etc. Are there some plants that flower throughout the year and some others that show seasonal flowering? Plants the annual and biennial types show clear-cut vegetative, reproductive and senescent phases, but in the perennial species it is very difficult to clearly define these phases. A few plants exhibit unusual flowering phenomena. Some of them, such as the bamboo species, flower only once in their lifetime, generally after 15 to 100 years, produce large number of fruits and die. Another plant, Strobilanthes conthenia, also known as Neil Korangi, flowers once in 12 years. As many of you would be knowing that these plants flowered during September October 2006. It was flowering transformed large tracts of hilly areas in Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu into blue stretches and attracted a large number of tourists in animals. The juvenile phase is followed by morphological and physiological changes prior to active reproductive behavior. The reproductive phase is also of variable duration in different organisms. Among animals, for example, birds, do they lay eggs all through the year, or is it a seasonal phenomenon? What about other animals like frogs and lizards? You will notice that birds living in nature lay eggs only seasonally. However, birds in captivity, as in poultry farms, can be made to lay eggs throughout this year. In case laying eggs is not related to the reproduction but is a commercial exploitation for human welfare. The female of placental mammals exhibit cyclical changes in the activities of ovaries and accessory duct as well as hormones during the reproductive phase. In non-primate mammals like cows, sheep, rats, deers, dogs, tigers, etc., such cyclical changes during reproduction are called oosterous cycles, whereas in primates, monkey, apes and humans it is called menstrual cycle. Many mammals, especially those living in natural wild conditions, exhibit such cycles only during favorable seasons in their reproductive phase and are therefore called seasonal breeders. Many other mammals are reproductively active throughout their active phase and hence are continuous breeders. That we all grow old if we live long enough is something that we recognize. The end of reproductive phase can be considered as one of the parameters of senescence or old age. They are concomitant changes in the body like slowing of metabolism etc. during this last phase of lifespan. Old age ultimately leads to death. In both plants and animals, hormones are responsible for the transitions between the three phases. Between hormones and certain environmental factors regulate the reproductive process and the associated behavioral expressions of events in sexual reproduction. So, after attainment of maturity, all sexually reproducing organisms exhibit events and processes that have remarkable fundamental similarity. Even though the structures associated with sexual reproduction are indeed very different, the events of sexual reproduction, though elaborate and complex, follow a regular sequence. Sexual reproduction is characterized by the fusion for fertilization of the male and female gametes, the formation of zygote and embryogenesis. For convenience, these sequential events may be grouped into three distinct stages, namely the pre-fertilization, fertilization and post-fertilization events. Now, pre-fertilization events. These include all the events of sexual reproduction prior to the fusion of gametes. The two main pre-fertilization events are gametogenesis and gamete transfer. Now, gametogenesis. As you are already aware, gametogenesis refers to the process of formation of the two types of gametes, male and female. Gametes are haploid cells. In some algae, the two gametes are so similar in appearance that it is not possible to categorize them into male and female gametes. They are hence are called homogametes and the isogametes. However, in a majority of sexually reproducing organisms, the gametes produced are of two morphologically distinct type, heterogametes. In such organism, the male gametes is called the anthrazoid or sperms and the female gametes is called the egg or ovum. Sexuality in organism. Sexual reproduction in organism generally involves the fusion of gametes from two different individuals, but this is not always true. Plants may have both male and female reproductive structures in the same plants, known as bisexual, or on different plants known as unisexual. In several fungi and plants, terms such as homothelic and monoecious are used to denote the bisexual condition, and heterothelic and dioecious are the terms used to describe unisexual condition. In flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is staminate, for example, bearing stamens, while the female is pistillate or bearing pistils. In some flowering plants, both male and female flowers may be present on the same individual, known as monoecious, or on separate individuals, known as dioecious. Some examples of monoecious plants are cucurbits and coconuts, and of dioecious plants are papaya and date palm. But what about animals? Are individuals of all species either male or female, unisexual, or are there species which possess both the reproductive organs bisexual? Now, tapeworm and leech, typical examples of bisexual animals and sponges also included, that possess both male and female reproductive organs, are hermaphrodites. Cockroach is an example of unisexual species. Cell division during gamete formation. Gametes in all heterogametic species are of two types, namely male and female. Gametes are haploid, though the parent plant body from which they arise may be either haploid or diploid. A haploid parent produces gametes by mitotic division. Several organisms belonging to Monera, fungi, algae, and bryophytes have haploid plant body, but organisms belonging to pteridophytes, gymnosperms, angiosperms, and most of the animals, including human, belongs to the parental body is diploid. It is obvious that meiosis, the reduction division, has to occur if a diploid body has to produce haploid gametes. In diploid organisms, splice cells called meiocytes, gamete mother cell, undergo meiosis. At the end of meiosis, only one set of chromosomes gets incorporated into each gamete. Now, gamete transfer. After their formation, male and female gametes must be physically brought together to facilitate fusion fertilization. In a majority of organisms, male gamete is motile and the female gamete is stationary. Exception are a few fungi and algae in which both type of gametes are motile. There is a need for a medium through which the male gamete moves. In several simple plants like algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which these gamete transfer takes place. A large number of the male gamete, however, fail to reach the female gametes to compensate these loss of male gametes during transport. The number of male gametes produced is several thousand times the number of female gametes produced. In seed plant, pollen grains are the carriers of male gametes and ovule have the egg. Pollen grains produced in anther therefore have to be transferred to the stigma before it can lead to fertilization. In bisexual self-fertilizing plants, peas transfers of pollen grains to the stigma is relatively easy as anthers and stigma are located close to each other. Pollen grains soon after they are shed come in contact with the stigma, but in cross-pollinating plants including dioecious plants, a specialized event called pollination facilitates transfer of pollen grains to the stigma. Pollen grains germinate on the stigma and the pollen tubes carrying the male gametes reach the ovule and discharge male gametes near the egg. In dioecious animals, since male and female gametes are formed in different individuals, the organism must evolve a special mechanism for gamete transfer. Successful transfer and coming together of gametes is essential for the most critical event in sexual reproduction, the fertilization. Now, fertilization. The most vital event of sexual reproduction is perhaps the fusion of gametes. This process called syngamy results in the formation of a diploid zygote. The term fertilization is also often used for this process. The terms syngamy and fertilization are frequently used interchangeably. However, it has to be mentioned here that in some organisms like rotifers, honeybees, and even some lizards and birds, turkey, the female gamete undergoes development to form new organism without fertilization. This phenomena is called parthenogenesis. Where does syngamy occur? Its question. In most aquatic organisms, such a majority of algae and fishes, as well as amphibians, syngamy occurs in the external medium water, for example outside the body of the organism. This type of gametic fusion is called external fertilization. Organisms exhibiting external fertilization show great synchrony between the sexes and release a large number of gametes into the surrounding medium water in order to enhance the chances of syngamy. This happens in the bony fishes and frogs where a large number of offsprings are produced. A major disadvantage is that the offspring are extremely vulnerable to predators threatening their survival up to adulthood. In many terrestrial organisms belonging to fungi, higher animals such as reptiles, birds, mammals, and in a majority of plants, bryophytes, pterophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, syngamy occurs inside the body of the organisms. Hence, the process is called internal fertilization. In all these organisms, egg is formed inside the female body where they fuse with the male gamete, the organism exhibiting internal fertilization. The male gamete is motile and has to reach the egg in order to fuse with it. In these, even though the number of sperms produced is very large, there is a significant reduction in the number of eggs produced in plants. However, the non-motile male gametes are carried to female gamete by pollen tube. Now, post-fertilization events. Events in sexual reproduction after the formation of gametes for formation of zygote are called post-fertilization events. The zygote Formation of the diploid zygote is universal in all sexually reproducing organisms. In organisms with external fertilization, zygote is formed in the external medium, usually water, whereas in those exhibiting internal
Hello
fertilization,
students, welcome to NEET Visa.
zygote is
So
formed
in this
inside the
video,
body of the
we are going to
organism.
discussing about
Further
the
development of the
remaining
zygote
portion
depends on the
of
type of
the
life cycle the
animal
organism
kingdom.
has
So
and the
let's
environment
start it
it is
from the
exposed to.
phylum
In organism
Chordata.
belonging to fungi and
Animals
algae,
belonging to phylum
zygote
Chordata
develops a thick wall
are
that is
fundamentally
resistant to
characterized by the
dissection
presence
and
of
damage.
notochord,
It undergoes a
a
period of
dorsal
rest
hollow
before
nerve cord,
germination
and
in
paired
organism with
pharyngeal gill
haplontic life
slits.
cycle.
These are
Zygote
bilaterally
divides by meiosis to
symmetrical
form haploid spores that
triploblastic
grow into haploid
coelomate with organ
individuals.
system level
Zygote is
of
the vital link
organization.
that ensures
They
continuity
possess
of
a
species between
post-anal tail
organisms of
and a
one
closed
generation
circulatory
and the next.
system.
Every sexually reproducing
Now,
organism, including human being,
differences between
life
the
as a
chordates
single
and the
cell, the zygote.
non-chordates. So
Now,
first we see chordates.
embryogenesis. Embryogenesis
Notochord
refers to the
present
process of development
central
of embryo
nervous
from
system
the
is
zygote.
dorsal, hollow
During
and single.
embryogenesis, zygote
Pharynx
undergoes cell division,
perforated by gill
mitosis, and cell
slits. Heart is
differentiation.
ventral.
While
A
cell divisions
post-anal
increase the
part
number
tail
of
is
cells in the
present.
developing embryo,
Now,
cell differentiation helps
non-chordates.
group of cells to
Notochord
undergo certain
absent.
modification to
Central
form
nervous system
specialized
is
tissue and
ventral,
organ to
solid
form
and
an
double. Gill
organism.
slits are absent.
Animals are
Heart
categorized
is
into
dorsal.
oviparous and
If
viviparous
present,
based on the
post-anal
whether the
tail
development of the
is
zygote takes
absent.
place outside the body of the female
Phylum
parent or
Chordata is
inside.
divided
Whether
into
the
three
fertilized,
subphylum:
unfertilized eggs or new birth young
Urochordata
ones
or
in
Tunicata,
oviparous animals like
Cephalochordata
reptiles
and
and birds, the
Vertebrata.
fertilized egg
Subphyla
covers
Urochordata
by
and
hard
Cephalochordata are
calcareous
often
shell
referred
are
to
laid
as
in a safe place
protochordates
in the
and are
environment.
exclusively
After a
marine.
period
In
of incubation,
urochordate,
young ones hatch
notochord
out.
is
On the
present
other hand,
only
in
in larval
viviparous
tail,
animals, majority of
while in
mammals, including human beings,
Cephalochordata it
the zygote
extends
develops
from
into a young
head
ones
to
outside
tail region
inside the
and is
body of female
persistent
organism.
throughout their
After
life. Some
attaining a certain
example:
stage of growth,
Urochordata,
the young ones
Acidia,
are delivered out
Salpa,
of the body
Dolinium,
of the female organism
Cephalochordata,
because of proper embryonic care
Benigtostoma
and protection.
amphixius,
The
or
chances of
lanceolate. The
survival of
members of
young ones is
subphylum
greater in
Vertebrata
viviparous
possess
organism. In
notochord
flowering plants,
during
the
the
zygote
embryonic
is
period.
formed inside the
The
ovule.
notochord
After
is replaced
fertilization,
by
the
a
sepals,
cartilaginous
petals,
or
and the
bony
stamens
vertical
of the
column
flower wither and
in
fall.
the adult.
The pistil,
Thus, all
however, remains
vertebrates
attached to
are
the plants.
chordates,
The zygote
but all
develops into the
chordates are
embryo,
not
and the ovules
vertebrates.
develop in the seed.
Besides
The
the
ovary
basic chordate
develops in the fruit,
characters,
which
vertebrates
develops in
have
a
a
thick
ventral muscular
wall called
heart
pericarp
with
that is
2, 3,
protective
or
in
4
function. After
chambers,
dispersal,
kidneys for
seeds
excretion
germinate
and
under
osmoregulation,
favorable
and
conditions
paired appendages
to produce
which may be
new
fins
plants.
or limbs. Now,
So in this
the
video,
vertebrata
we
divided into
completed
agnatha and
the first chapters of the
gnethostomata.
class
In the
12
agnatha,
reproduction in
legs jaw.
organism. From the
In the
next video,
agnatha,
we are going to
the
discuss
class
you about
cyclostomata
and the
included,
organoids
and the
for the
gnethostomata bears
reproduction
jaw,
in
but
flowering
it
plants.
divided
Thank you.
into two superclass also. Pages